Norwegian.
Sorry.
This is on already. So, this is the first thing. So this series that I'm putting on the internet, I call them Science of Singing, you know. And first of all, I'm very happy that you joined my program, and wonderful singers, both of you, and also a wonderful teacher. I'd like you to introduce yourself and tell a little bit about yourself in very, very brief.
Okay, yes. My name is David Bartlett, and I've been a singer for over 30 years. Started at the Royal College of Music in London, joined various opera companies. About halfway through my career, I had a few vocal problems, and very luckily found a very good maestro who got me back on the straight and narrow. I then thought I'd diversify from pure singing as a singer to become an agent. And to start with, I decided to stop singing and be an agent. And then I decided, well, I can't do without being a singer. It's me, and that's it. So I then, for quite a few years, ran an agency and carried on singing with various opera companies. How did I become a teacher? I always said I wouldn't teach anybody until I really knew what I was doing myself, which is probably a good thing. So I think it's mainly through the agency. I was taking on singers, auditioning them, talking to them, giving them advice. And a lot of this advice turned out to be vocal advice. And a lot of people said, "Oh, David, do you mind giving us a few lessons?" So I became a sort of teacher as well as an agent and a singer. And very recently, I had the great fortune to meet up with one of the top Icelandic lyric tenors. He met with me as an agent to get my opinion on whether he could become not a Helden tenor, but a Jugendliche Helden tenor. And I gave him my opinion. He then said, "Could you give me some lessons?" I gave him some lessons, and I think he must have been very pleased, because he then said he teaches himself back home in Iceland. He then said, "Would you like to come over and give a masterclass at the conservatoire that I teach, the Sångskole Demet in Reykjavik?" And I said I'd be delighted to, so I gave a masterclass, which was a great success. And suddenly I got all these people wanting singing lessons, and I've really been concentrating quite a bit on teaching singing for about the last 2 or 3 years, I'd say. And that's me as a teacher. I think it's to become a teacher, you've got to have a very good ear. And I think I gained that by being a singer myself, obviously, by singing in operas, by having certain vocal problems and not being able to solve them from my own point of view, having to go to someone for help, then stopping singing and becoming an agent. Therefore I was listening to singers with all the knowledge I had so far, and realising what perhaps I'd been doing wrong, because I could see what they were doing that was wrong. And then gradually I started giving people advice, but it's always based on what you hear. If you listen to someone sing, you really need to listen to the voice, with obviously an experience that's gone before, so you can make a judgment. I don't think enough people listen before they give advice.
I agree.
They make a snap judgment, and that's the problem so often. They don't judge the voice for what it basically is as a natural instrument. So, there we are.
I think if you've been through ups and downs as a singer yourself, you've had problems you've had to sort out, then you can help people, I think, to solve their problems. You can understand, you can maybe explain more easily than someone who's never...
Who's blessed.
That's had
never had to
think about it so much.
Because that is what singing is. We all start to sing. It's totally natural singers. No
instinctual.
Problem.
It's very
instinctual.
And that's it. And then we go through a career, and influences come on us.
And that's probably why the reason, maybe touching some politically incorrect subject, that some famous singers, excellent singers, who I mean, we all love and adore, and just wondering how do they get these beautiful voices and beautiful techniques. They end up being quite average teachers, if not really poor teachers.
Yeah.
And I'd like to talk about this, not mentioning the names, of course.
No, of course not.
But as we can see for some master classes, which master classes tend to be more the style interpretation.
Yeah.
But some teachers do touch technique, and
Well,
you can clearly see. That's one of the most common thing that I hear today in master classes, and which I disagree myself, is the mentioning of the mask. Almost all the time, teachers want to mention the mask, and by that they kind of it's like a magic word or a magic direction towards the student.
It's like a quick fix in a way.
It is a quick fix.
To for the resonance.
It's a quick fix that can lead to terrible problems later on, sooner or later on. That's the problem with focusing on the mask.
And James McCracken was mentioning that I would never mention mask to my student unless they know already how to sing.
Of course.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You need to support your voice from somewhere different. Try to project into the mask is really going from nowhere to nowhere. You concentrate from somewhere else, and it goes through the mask once it's properly supported and focused, as James McCracken obviously was saying.
Right. I've attended, now I have to mention the name because...
Well, why not?
Yes, but at the same time I have to first really say my great admiration for Marilyn Horne, who I think I read her interview with Jerome Hines, and I was really surprised because she had almost the same technique and the same understanding of support as man, which is low support and which is low larynx. And you can, I adore her voice, I adore her performances. And yet, when she came to Montreal to give a masterclass, she was always saying the mask and the mask and the mask. And what the result, actually, what I saw is most of the students who tried that, they went right direct nasal.
Yes.
And that is...
That's how people often interpret it.
And you don't hear that in Marilyn Horne.
No.
The opposite.
She's herself is absolutely...
And she's got the most amazing chest voice I've always heard.
Absolutely.
So strong.
And now, because of that, now it's all a science of singing. I want to touch this subject of personal perception and personal feelings, or personal sensations rather than feelings, of a singer. And why this... obviously, that mask that most of the teachers now use, it's coming from somewhere, from absolutely the cliché. But it's an important cliché that was mentioned by famous singers or famous teachers before, and it's like almost a disease now. It's catching up with other teachers. They hear, oh, somebody famous mentioned mask, yes, and we mentioned mask, and why? I do not necessarily myself think that any cliché can be wrong or right. It depends on how personally function with this cliché. I think that mentioning mask with a certain student can be very, very great idea. I do not mention it personally because I think most of the cases it misleads students. But I think that probably it is possible that for some it's a beneficiary. They can benefit from it. And now I'm touching the question of how do we singers feel and sense our voice? What it has to do objectively with the reality and with the right technique. Typical weather in Bergen. Yes, those sunny days were very untypical, but I was very fortunate that I had a free day. But you know, this is Bergen. This is the town of the umbrellas, as they call it.
Perché sia pago ogni voto sei giusto, bello il poter non è che soggetti le lacrime non terge, ed incorrota e gloria non viva.
Specific or was
I think you're being very specific. I do have to say that I feel that most of the problems I find with my students, and obviously that's so varied, one can't generalise, is that they, I suppose, afraid, they're apprehensive as to how to start the first note. They don't know how to get there. And I say, well, the first thing you have to remember is that when you're just sitting there thinking about it without any accompanist, either pianist or orchestra with a conductor, you've really got to totally use your imagination in order to get to your voice, because there's nothing prompting you. The moment of opening your mouth to sing is not being led into by the fact you've got 5 bars of music that you're singing. So what you need to do is to train yourself to imagine that you're going to sing at a certain point. Give yourself a rhythm, if you like. But I use visual. I think if you can't teach someone visually, then there is a big problem, because I just don't know how the voice comes to connection without you doing it totally naturally. And it's like having a vision, having a visual. It's hearing something and feeling you want to do it. This is how we first started singing, perhaps as all children of various ages, anything between 3, 5, 7, 10. One day we opened our mouth and we sang, and everybody said, "Oh, that's fantastic, that's beautiful, well, you must sing more." One thing they never get at that age, none of us ever got at that age, was, "Who's your singing teacher?" Now, what got us to the point where we just thought, and you sang, because it's that vision, it's that feeling that brings the vocal cords together with the connection of a very fast current of electricity from the brain, because it's got to affect those vocal cords by the little muscles in the larynx to get them in the right position to produce whatever your first note is going to be, together with the feeling. And it all happened equally and instantly before you started thinking about it. So be careful of thinking too much about it.
It's like speaking.
And
we don't think
it's exactly, it's very connected with preparation for speech.
Yeah.
Because you feel as though you want to do it, and
that's
you do
what
it.
I always say, that you mustn't make a big deal out of starting a note.
But you have to use imagination to get there. Because if we're speaking, either as an actor or just everyday conversation, we have a reason for saying the next sentence, starting the next sentence. It's because we want to communicate a feeling or an idea. And so we have to do the same thing.
So if you're just thinking about the idea of producing a sound, and you don't want to get too tied in knots, thinking, how do I do it, what happens? I think the best way around it is to say to somebody, imagine you're just going to speak to me, and then just speak on a note.
I agree.
That's my bloody phone. So it's as easy,
I'm going to cut that bit.
it's as easy as pushing a button. So that's what I say as well, to start to sing. Just
but it's not complicating
like when I say
matters.
to you, hi,
Hi.
hi, 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 hi. See, I've got my voice today.
Yes.
Hi, hi, hi. Just so that the chords just come together.
You become Norwegian
Without
then,
thinking.
because they always say hi, hi twice.
Yeah. But, well, I said hi, it's not maybe a good example of, starting, but just so that it's not made, one doesn't make a big deal out of it.
Well, that's what I was saying.
No, I know that.
I
agree with you.
But of course, as soon as one starts explaining why, then it sounds complicated. But for me to say to someone, get into your own mind, look out there, think something is coming back, and you're ready to say something, you're going to go and hold it. Ah! which it can easily be, you hold it first on a point. Ah, there you are.
Yeah.
And it comes from the imagination.
There's another thing that was very important to me as a singer. I fell in love with Enrico Caruso's recording when I was a kid, very small. And this sound affected my imagination, and only after I was 30, I started listening to other tenors and singers, because Caruso for me was a god, you know, and I didn't like anybody else but Caruso. Then I started appreciating more, you know, more diversity in voices, and obviously Corelli, and I read actually Corelli's remark. He's mentioning that no matter how you try to be someone else, and he meant Caruso. Actually, he said, Caruso, you have to respect your own nature. This is a dilemma for us because, for example, I wanted to be Caruso, but I cannot be Caruso, and I should not be Caruso, because I should be myself. But how can I really find myself and my voice? It is a process that comes to me as evolving process and natural. Definitely it is the way, it takes time. Or it's the teacher that helps me to discover it. What is this ratio of involvement, if you like, of a teacher? If you're lucky, of course, with a good teacher, if the teacher respects your nature in the first place. Because I also know that no matter how many teachers claim today of universality, it's just virtually impossible to be universally, you know. And the practice proves that a good teacher, one good teacher creates or makes maybe few good singers, and he becomes famous because of that. But nobody counts his failures necessarily. The failures can be usually counted as, the students were not talented or they didn't have enough, you know. I think it's the more complicated process than that. And I want you to discuss this a little bit, because I don't think anybody else discussed this problem. It's a very sensitive problem. It's a sensitive problem. It's even politically incorrect in a way. But I feel it should be discussed, because
I think it ought to be.
Yeah.
I think, first of all, I don't like to think in terms of terming anyone failure. There'll only be a few Carusos, Corellis and Pavarottis in a whole millennium, over the hundreds of years. There are many fine singers who no one's ever heard of. We know that because every time so often we come across an old recording of someone from the past who hardly ever recorded, and you think, that is amazing singing. Why wasn't he famous? Well, there are various reasons for that. So it certainly wasn't a failure. So I think teaching singing, as you say, is very difficult in terms of two personalities coming together, being able to see the problem and the possibilities from the same point of view. Because we're not talking about an exact science where you can put your finger on something and you can tweak it and do things like that, violinist, pianist, whatever. We're talking about a combination of setting up the larynx in perfect position in an instant through our imagination to produce a sound, a resonance, just for a split second, and then supporting that in the correct way so that split second sound is not distorted, and that we continue that lack of distortion and support for the whole of a phrase. Then we stop, start again, and we do it again. Now, how on earth can we do that other than through the imagination and through instinct and conveying something? Of course, we'd explain what's happening. I can explain in great detail, so can you, so can we all, what actually happens in the larynx. People take photographs of it, take films of it. But finally, it's just a case of two people with probably varying, if not widely differing, imaginations and backgrounds, trying to explain how this pupil, if you want to call them pupils, how this pupil can improve what they're doing already naturally, or unfortunately what they can improve or correct what they're doing already unnaturally, and that's been imposed for various reasons. They become problems. That's why they tend to come to singing teachers. people write books on this, and I think they can be very useful, but at the end of the day, you've got to be two people in the room working through a problem with a very free imagination. So you can see the problem and you can witness it, but how do you actually get to correct it? And I think, personally, I think it's by a process of trial and error, trying things out, trying to make not just singing sounds. In fact, I think proper support can be found through doing some of the most peculiar sounds at times. But that's it. It is a science. The actual technique, you can describe it. And there you are, a perfect resonance, and you support it, and there you are, a beautiful note. But that's not just enough. Because the reason why we sing is because of our feelings, our passions, our reactions to the words, a reaction to the music. You have to allow that to come into it as well. So at the same time as you're setting up a technical support, correct technical support, you're having to allow the reason for singing, therefore the feelings and the emotions to come in as well. Magically it happens, but we can't control it. We set it up and we want it to happen, and it will happen, and we sustain it because we want it to continue. But we don't start doing anything once we've got it there. That's what I believe, anyway. I think there's too much interference, too much. Yes, we do need that.
Science do help us to understand and to probably get rid of not get rid of, but to understand better the implications of the cliches.
Well, they help us understand what's happening naturally. We understand why, as a child of 8, we suddenly opened our mouth and had a fantastic voice.
But we come to the point,
Science
again,
that.
the teacher who has a PhD in many fields, like, voice or, even acoustics, and knowing everything that is modern science has to, to give you. At the same time, maybe very, very destructive teacher, because the most important thing is ear, as you mentioned just before. A good ear. No matter what we say, no matter how we brag about, our knowledge about singing and the low larynx and the resonance and all this vocal cords, the right way to hear your students' mistakes. Because again, this is, I don't know, I think I mentioned that before. And we come to the little bit of different subjects. The same technique is that inability of some students or teachers to understand bigger voices, and also inability for some teachers to understand smaller voices. It's not only for the big voices, and some teachers push smaller voices into bigger ones because they have big voices and they've been through this big operas, career, and vice versa, and how destructive it can be for a singer that has a potential of a big voice or a small, nice voice to be pushed either towards different direction, in the wrong direction.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. You have to recognise what the individual... We're all different. Sometimes the difference is really slight, but when people are different. And then, all right, you've got the print of the voice, and you know, well, it's that type of voice. You're pretty astute at working that out. Then you've got to deal with the personality of the student to understand it.
Yes.
And all that,
Bravo,
and
because
then
I just
musicianship does come into it, but also just apprehension, if you like to call it nerves. That can affect people's singing. Some students don't have that problem, or have it to a lesser degree than other students. And it's no use teaching people one way and saying that's the way you've got to do it.
Some
If they
teachers have a
approach it
method,
differently.
don't they? And they apply it no matter who they're teaching.
Yeah,
they
well,
apply
that's
that method.
That's just the physical
Yes.
facts of how the voice
That's
works.
very wrong.
Yes. Of course it is.
I totally do not believe in methods in this case, because methods are good only for the academic courses and for the
Yeah.
report.
All it is explaining technically what's happening, but you can't have a method of getting everyone in the same place. You can't. You have
Right.
to try a different way.
And
They
so-
all start at a different point anyway. Let's face it. You get a complete beginner. I had a man come to me the other day, 40 years old. He looked about 32. He looked very young anyway. He said he was a bass, but I gradually found out, not gradually, very quickly found out, he thought he was probably a baritone. This voice was completely untrained. He just sung in choirs. I love singing. And he'd been persuaded to come to me by a young professional singer who knows it. And this man said to me, "Oh, well, I just love singing, but I think I might be a baritone." Now, this man had a completely untouched voice at the age of 40. No one had interfered with it. It was one of the best Verdi baritones I've ever heard. Potentially.
It was all.
It's a man like when I teach in Iceland. And a lovely person. And I thought, well, if he comes back to me and he's seriously interested and he wants to go further, great. But if he doesn't, he's happy. He's singing. He's doing what he wants to do, and that's it. And
Well,
the joy
I
of
think
it
we
was
should
that
be
he
like-
had a voice.
I'd like to quote
that was so
Domingo in
natural.
that sense, because Domingo said once, "I'm spoiled because I'm a wealthy man. I have very high fees, and at the same time, I'm doing things that I love to do." And I think unfortunately, that's not always with all professionals. Some professionals feel more like amateurs, and it's a good feeling when you feel like an amateur, like you have this.
There's passion.
Passion,
Yeah, enjoy
for
it.
this. No matter how good
I
you are,
couldn't agree more.
how much you're paid, you still have this passion. And
But I think it's important also to say that if you're not happy as a professional or an amateur with your voice, with your singing, it can be hell on earth. You know, if the voice isn't working right.
and it's also
I think
it's a
we've all
sign
had-
also.
We've
Well,
all
because-
had stages
and
like that.
you're having to rehearse and have the pressure on you, the performance coming up, and you feel the voice isn't working for whatever reason. You know, you might not have your technique sussed, or you might not be feeling well, or whatever. And that is the worst thing ever. And then you just don't want to know. You wish you weren't a singer, I think. And then when it's going well and everything's working well, it's fantastic.
Right.
But I think that's just worth mentioning because it's such an important thing to feel happy
Yes.
with
That was
your
my.
vocal health.
I was visiting, not mentioning the name, one opera company, and with beautiful voices. Probably my subscribers will know about it, but I still don't mention the name. And they beautiful voices, but all pushing, very hard, all pushing. And one of the singers actually came to me, and she liked the way I sang and technique and everything. And so she asked for one lesson, and I said, well, of course. And so we met, and the first thing I told her in a very, very diplomatic way, that she's not happy on stage when she's singing. And the reaction was reaction, not saying that, how dare you sing so? Of course I'm an opera singer, I love it. But then when really touched it, side, and she really agreed with me. And I have to again mention the beautiful voice, beautiful woman also, beautiful. But because of this improper technique and pushing, it's
even more frustrating if you have a good voice.
It is
because pushing, as we know, kills off the true resonance and the true personality of the voice. That's the first thing it kills off. Eventually it kills the voice.
I think even when you've got a good technique, a sound technique, I mean, sometimes the voice just, it's difficult. It feels like hard work.
Yeah.
But at least if you've got a good basic technique, then that's fine. You can accept
Yes,
it. It's
when
when you
gets through.
it's when you
one has to,
feel
and
that
that's what it's like.
that you're just singing on a wing and a prayer. If you know what I mean. If it's good. Think, one day it works okay, and then the next day it doesn't work okay, and you don't know why. That's not a nice feeling. I mean, I've been there.
We all
been
there.
We've all been there. And I spent many years trying to sort things out for myself. Well, and going to various singing teachers as well. But the relief when you finally feel, oh yes, I know. I think it's also to do with getting a bit older as well, maturity, and particularly if you've got a big voice, because I think big voices can be difficult. When you're younger, naughty, they like to do their own thing, don't they? And when the voice is changing a bit, so you're always trying to find the right balance. But I think once you get to a certain age, and the voice is mature and strong, if you haven't ruined it, then it seems to settle. Well, this is my experience anyway. I got to the stage where I thought, this is my voice. I know what my voice. I found my voice. This is how it should. This is how where it's happy, and it sounds like this. It's my voice. So that's a good feeling, and then you feel the technique comes together, and then you feel from day to day, it's fairly consistent. I mean, some days better than others, obviously,
right,
depending on how you feel physically, the weather, anything, and that gives you a sense of confidence, gives you more confidence, and I think that then it makes singing a much happier experience, or a happy experience, which it should be. Which it should be.
This also touching, it'll be coming back, because I wanted to mention something about the comments on the first postings of Science of Singing. Is that one person posted a comment. It was really very positive comments, and those who commented, some of them are regular commentators, if you like, on my side, and I know some of them are professional singers, so they really understood when I was talking about the necessity of personal experience of a student that is never to be underestimated. It's very important for a student to learn himself or herself with the help of a teacher, and that's what the real individual approach, I guess, is, which is very unlikely, but it could happen too. But I do not consider any method that does not involve individual research, both done by students, and I don't mean research, scientific research, I mean research of your own feelings and sensations. Example, when I teach my students, I always refer to their own feelings and sensations. I do give them kind of an advice or cliches, because cliches are the link towards our subconsciousness. Like even the so notoriously mentioned mask. It's a cliche. It's a way to project maybe some voices who are too way back and don't have any projection. So, or the feeling of a drinking sound. They're all imageries that help us to somehow, but they might work, but they are not absolute things. And with my students, I do this. I do mention those cliches, traditional so-called cliches. At the same time, when they do the right thing, I stop them and I ask them, how do you feel? And long time ago, I had this answer sometimes, you know what, we do not feel the way you told us to feel. And since then I realized that, yes, why should we insist on a particular sensation? This sensation might work with A student and might not work with B students. So why don't we just let them do an experiment and under our control? And then when they do it right, we say, that is right. Now remember these feelings and these sensations. And those are, no matter, even if they feel some weird things and they create their own imagery, it doesn't matter. What matters is that they create their own cliches that makes this link towards the subconsciousness, and as you mentioned at the beginning, settles up this larynx in the right position, and everything works fine.
I think you've said it pretty well. I actually mentioned this idea, which you've just reiterated in different words, the idea that when you're teaching someone to sing, you make some of the most peculiar sounds, and you get your student to do in order to find what naturally will support their voice, so they can then hold on to it, if you like to put it that way. I once had a very disarming comment apropos of the idea that, oh, well, everybody sees it some way differently. I've got many various ways of saying to people, once they've created initial resonance, just that split-second resonance by parting the vocal cords in pitch. Right, they do that. Now, how are they going to support it? It has to be a downward pull from the large extensors here. And I usually say, well, it's like an inward yawn, or perhaps even you're going to be sick, you know, you pull down. And you would talk about drinking, same thing.
Yes.
Pulling down, supporting, therefore, giving the strength to support a resonance that had been previously created right in the middle of the larynx. And I tried this with this one man, and he looked at me, rather benignly, I thought, and he said, oh, I just think of pulling down. He was doing it perfectly.
Yes,
and I thought he was trying out one of my ideas. He said, oh, I just think of pulling down. Then we have to learn as teachers, every time it happens, that we mustn't be too insistent on any ideas. Give it a try.
Right.
But let them find it their own way.
That's true.
That's what we did originally. I always go back to the young singer that opened his mouth and sang the first time. He did it himself.
Right.
And we have to understand a way of getting to that point where they do it themselves. It's not easy.
It's not easy. I have to mention the name of the person and the singer that I really admire, Jerome Hines, the American bass.
Yeah.
And
You compared that book we were
yes,
interviewing all these different singers
different
about
singers.
technique.
Yes.
But he said, I don't know if you saw at the beginning, it's quite funny. It said, beware reading this as a singer. Reading this book can seriously damage your vocal health. Because it says it's so diverse.
Yes.
What everybody says is just. You know,
This is the
Yes.
problem. I have students who are so certain that they have to get a technique. They read this, they listen to that, they do that, and they want me to instill on them a technique. I say, sorry, I can't do it. I'm going to lead you to find your real voice. I want you to understand it and go from there. Because I think it's terribly dangerous. They never let go the vocal personality if they do that. They can't. Because technique is only a start.
you can't
You then
impose
pour
to-
out your feelings, and your natural larynx, whatever that might be, is freed up to give its maximum performance by the support. But it's what you put into that support. That's
Right.
singing. Otherwise,
Yeah.
well, it might as well be oboes or flutes.
I agree. The way I mentioned Jerome Hines, because I'd like to, for the future singers and future teachers, because he was also teaching, and to really be as open-minded as Jerome Hines was, and I really admire his open-mindedness and his political incorrectness, if you like, when he wrote his own book about Four Voices of a Man. And he's, I didn't know before, but he had a degree in engineering, so he was, quite an intelligent person and scientific. And he comes to the point of different sensations and different approaches. And that basically triggers. It's a very complicated book to read, honestly. You have to really. And I don't know if it's a really great help for the young singer. Probably not. But what makes the point of so many different points of view that are right in its own way, but again, that also opens up our mind as a singers that we should find our own way to do it.
Exactly.
And in my personal experience, I had very good teachers I was, blessed. But up to this moment, I realized that no teacher in the world knows 100% what you need.
Which is why one should try and go from one's instincts as far as possible and try and search out the people that can help you. And to go to one teacher is very good, and they might give you a lot. But a singer should never be too loyal to a teacher. You're going beyond a certain point, and maybe that beyond that point,
sono d'amore la la sua parola udrà sonar d'amore. O dolce notte scendere, tu puoi gemata festa, e la mia stella è questa che in cielo non l'ha, questa è mia stella. Un generoso